Hey, how's it going? This is Crypto Introvert, and today I want to talk about Satoshi Nakamoto's secret message within the Genesis block that mined the first Bitcoin. And the message goes as follows: the times 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of a second bailout for banks. So I just want to go through the meaning behind this and give a bit of context behind the message. And the first thing is it's a timestamp. So the Times is actually a newspaper, or it could be the time is. So it had two meanings. So it could actually mean literal date timestamp. But either way, it acts as an identification of when this message was put in and the relevancy of this message during a time of great turmoil in the financial markets. And secondly, its meaning is to refer to the UK government's bailout of two specific banks, Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, and the Lloyds Banking Group. And this was using taxpayers' money to bail out banks in order for them to remain solvent, to restore confidence with the customers, and be able to operate as normal. Otherwise, they become insolvent and the banks would fail and go into administration. And that is the specific situation related to the message. But there is a wider context behind that message and why those two banks got into the situation they did in the first place. And that is the wider financial crisis that hit across the world. And that financial crisis relates a lot to how the financial system failed, how it got into that position. And it also illustrates in terms of what the central banks did. So we have a differentiation between central banks and banks. So central banks are, e.g., the Fed, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank. And these entities have the power, they have the ability through what they call quantitative easing. And what that is essentially electronically create more money. So I guess Satoshi's message and his kind of vision of Bitcoin is everything but what the current financial system is. And the issue with the current financial system, as we saw with financial crisis, is that governments or central banks did not allow corporations that operated in a bad way by having toxic debts or toxic assets. They did not let them fail, and they, in effect, artificially allowed them to survive. And how they did that is through taxpayers' money, and as well as quantitative easing, and that entails the central banks essentially lowering interest rates, increasing their reserves, and then buying, for instance, government bonds, i.e. lending money to the government and also banks as well. And by doing that, they're introducing more money supply into the system. That's okay sometimes in cases where economic growth has dipped and monetary policy is used as a kind of impetus to improve the conditions. But where it comes as an issue is when inflation kicks in. And the definition of inflation is when there's an increase in price, an increase in, say, your wages perhaps, but your spending power is actually less. And that's because if there's more supply of money within the system and what's being demanded is not sustainable in terms of what the potential is for the economy, then you get a situation whereby your spending power isn't actually that much. And I think back in instances where there were hyperinflation in the past, that meant that it was cheaper to use your banknotes as wallpaper rather than actually buying wallpaper. So that's an extreme example. But the point is that central banks or government, they're meant to be independent, but in practice they're not. They are able to essentially print money out of thin air and introduce it into the system, and that can potentially devalue the hard-earned cash that you have made. And it comes with good intentions in that the lower interest rate helps you borrow money for cheaper and therefore increases consumer spending. But at the same time, as mentioned, it risks the situation of inflation where your fiat currency gets devalued. And that goes against what Bitcoin is about and what Satoshi's vision in his white paper, his or her white paper, is about. It's about having a decentralized currency whereby the supply cannot be manipulated by an entity. We know that Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million, and after that's produced, it will stop. So Bitcoin has a deflationary impact actually when it does a halving every 4 years. But the point is, Bitcoin is more reliable in the sense that you're not going to get that devaluation of your currency from central banks' actions.